Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Thank you, and welcome to another episode of the Brave New Weed podcast. I'm Joe Dolce. This is my voice with a cold. It sounds a little more throaty. I apologize in advance. But we have a great show today where we're talking to the man who runs a company out of California called Bloom Farms. And, you know, a lot of the prohibitionists are always talking about how greedy the world of cannabis is. And Bloom Farms is a really amazing organization because every time you buy something, it goes to feeding hungry people in California. They've given millions of dollars worth of food away and believe that cannabis has an obligation to do CSR, community-supported funding, and to really help communities sustain themselves. So I think that's really worth listening to. It's by the way, Bloom Farms also makes amazingly good, high-quality, hydrocarbon-free oils. They're wonderful. They even have some single estate blends, single estate oils that are really interesting and really worth knowing about. Unfortunately, of course, because of law, they're only available in California at the moment, but that will soon change. So wait a second and listen to Mike Ray and from Bloom Farms. So with me today, of course, is Matthew Hendershot. Hey, Matthew.
Hey, Joe, how's everything? I know you've been under the weather.
And I know you're off to Europe. Where are you going?
Actually get on a plane later today. I'll be flying into Milan, Italy. We'll do some bumming around northern Italy, and then we head north from there through Switzerland, Austria, Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium.
So I think Germany is starting a medical program next year. I'm sure they are, actually. And I believe Switzerland also currently has a medical cannabis program, either in the works or in the stores. Are you aware of any of that?
Switzerland has always been very couth about cannabis. There's not really any problems there. In fact, several years ago, my first trip to Switzerland was the first time I saw weed tea in a vending machine. That was kind of interesting. But yeah, very lax there. I think it's decriminalized, but I don't know of any particular program. Germany, depending on where you are, is up and down. There's a lot of cannabis around, but if you're in Bavaria and sort of the southern regions, they're very, very strict. The police there will stop and search automobiles, things like that.
Yeah.
But you get a little further north and it chills out a little bit.
Well, it's going to be changing when they go medical next year, which is really interesting because some of the top researchers and doctors have always been in Germany. You know, they have a lot of their medical program believes in botanical medicines. So they don't quite draw the line between, you know, prescription allopathic drugs and botanical medicines the way we do here. They're not quite so run by the pharmaceutical companies, interestingly enough, even though companies like Bayer are, of course, German companies. But anyway, listen, have a great trip. I think we have our first advertiser this week, do we not?
We do. This is really interesting for us. It's our first time to do it. Obviously, as a podcast, we are always looking for the opportunities to work with sponsors, to work with advertisers. And we have the first one to come on board, which is Death Wish Coffee. I'm actually having some Death Wish coffee right now.
Is it cannabis infused?
So check this out. I'm sure that listeners, and you're probably quite familiar with the concept of bulletproof coffee.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, adding peptides and coconut oil and stevia. But a lot of that also includes butter. You add butter to your coffee. Right. It's got a lot of things going on. But I have found with the Death Wish coffee that you can very much make like a death-proof coffee. And
death-proof coffee?
Yeah, instead of bulletproof, death-proof, because it's, you know, Death Wish coffee. It's sort of a play on words. But but you can absolutely substitute cannabis, canna butter for the salt-free butter and use that in your death-proof coffee.
So in California, people are using cannabis-infused coffee all over the place. Have you tried it? Do you like it?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with the Death Wish stuff is a very high caffeinated coffee. Yeah. So pairing that with the effects of cannabis sort of has an evening quality to it, to where you're not all hyped up all over from the caffeine. Sort of mitigates the caffeine effect, and also the caffeine mitigates the cannabis effect of the sort of head high type stuff. So I find it to be very leveled off.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad that Dish Wish is with us.
Well, and specifically, we're going to take a minute right now, and we're going to roll a pre-recorded spot that they sent us about the Death Wish podcast. So,
and it's our very first one, so let's try it. Let's see how it sounds.
Let's take a listen.
Whoa, how did we get on this podcast?
I'm not sure, but I like it here.
It's pretty great, but we should probably tell everyone about our own podcast, Fueled by Deathcast.
Hell yeah. Comes out every Thursday from the Death Wish Coffee Company, the world's strongest coffee.
Every week you can hear me, the Incredible Jeff.
And me, the amazing D-Man.
And we talk about new science discoveries, breaking news from Death Wish Coffee, and we welcome a special guest from rock stars to astronauts and ask them all the question, what fuels you?
The podcast is available right on deathwishcoffee.com and wherever podcasts are found, including iTunes, Google Music, Stitcher, and more.
Plus, you can now watch it live on the Death Wish Coffee Company page on Facebook and watch all our videos over on YouTube.
All right. Now you know all about Fueled by Deathcast and how you can listen to it.
But first, let's finish this podcast.
Let's get back to the show.
So there you have it. Death Wish Coffee, the first in-kind sponsor and supporter of the Brave New Weed podcast. How about that?
I can't wait to get some Death Wish into my system. Okay, ready to talk some news? Let's see what's going on in the world here.
Yeah, with that out of the way, let's get into the news. Okay, Joe, I'm so excited to do this. The first piece of news, I'm absolutely giddy. The first piece of news here, it comes out of Utah. Well, it comes out of Washington, D.C. But Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican of Utah.
Not one of my favorites. Go on.
Has introduced the Marijuana Effective Drug Study Act of 2017, or the MEDS Act, with a goal of improving the process for conducting scientific research on marijuana. So he is now behind federal research to study medical, which is great, right? We like it.
Finally, after 60 years or 70 years of prohibiting any research on looking at the health effects of marijuana.
There's two other Republicans who are co-sponsoring the bill, and two Democrats who are co-sponsoring the bill. So it's a bipartisan bill. All of that is great and well. I want to read for you the letter that Senator Orrin Hatch wrote.
Okay.
I love it. I hope I can get through it without just cracking up.
Orrin Hatch on our podcast. Okay, Matthew, I'm leaving this one to you. Go for it.
Quoting Orrin Hatch, "It's high time to address research into medical marijuana. Our country has experimented with a variety of state solutions without properly delving into the weeds on the effectiveness, safety, dosing, administration, and quality of medical marijuana. All the while, the federal government strains to enforce regulations that sometimes do more harm than good. To be blunt, we need to remove the administrative barriers preventing legitimate research into medical marijuana, which is why I've decided to roll out the MEDS Act."
Oh, come on. You're making this up.
It goes on. "I urge my colleagues to join Senator Satches and me in our joint effort to help thousands of Americans suffering from a wide range of diseases and disorders. In a Washington at war with itself, I have high hopes that this bipartisan initiative can be a kumbaya moment for both parties."
Oh, are you sure this is the real thing?
It's on his, if you go to hatch.senate.gov, here's his smiling picture. United States Senator for Utah, and there it is, in quotes, signed Senator Orrin Hatch.
Wow.
I love it.
Who knew the man had even a sense of humor, let alone the ability to write a sort of ironic letter to the federal government? That's very neat.
That's so good. And talk about like the last place you would expect something like that with a wink and a nod to come out of, right?
So Trump goes for DACA the same week that Orrin Hatch writes a letter to allow research into the health benefits of cannabis. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the world is shifting in some very strange ways that we don't quite understand, but this is good.
It is indeed. There's a lot of good stuff in the act, too. It encourages more research. It talks about rescheduling the cannabis inside the DEA. The act is also going to require NIDA to develop and publish recommendations for good manufacturing practices, checks and balances against abuse, controlled substances, and codify the administration's decisions to terminate the public health service and review its proposals for medical marijuana as well. So
the only thing
a lot of things.
The only thing I want to say is when this comes to this scheduling issue, and we should do a podcast on this, I really think descheduling is the only way to go. If they reschedule it into Schedule 2 or 3, the pharma companies have complete control over this plant. And I don't think that's a benefit to the world.
I agree with you.
So I think we should actually look at and talk about scheduling and descheduling. Let's work on scheduling a podcast on that, because it's a really important issue, and it could be done without anybody understanding the ramifications. It's a very complicated, crazy thing, scheduling.
Yeah.
You into it? Okay.
I am. I absolutely am. I'd love to hear more about it.
We'll do that. Okay. Well, that's great. Anything else going on in the world of weed this week?
Yeah, I mean, just like every week, there's a ton of stuff. It's hard to pick through these stories. I did pick out one other that caught my attention, which is that with the elections coming up in November, New Jersey Democrat Phil Murray, who is currently leading the governorship race by 25%, has come out and vowed to completely legalize recreational marijuana in the state of New Jersey. Great. So this comes from the sort of sea change that they've seen with gambling in Atlantic City, and is hinged almost entirely on the money aspect. So a lot of talk about money, talking about $300 million to $500 million in potential tax revenue that the state is missing out on. Those are the estimates for cannabis legalization in New Jersey. New Jersey used to count on Atlantic City for easy tax cash, and now that's gone. So the lawmakers are trying to figure it out. There's a lot of incumbent support should he get elected, and he's currently trouncing the rest of the field by a good quarter. So looks pretty good for Jersey.
That's good. I always get nervous when I hear only about the money thing. It's sort of not the point at the end of the day. But if it's what fuels the politicians, I guess we have to say, all right, we'll accept this. This is better than no reason at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's talking about job increases as well. People like senators and state senators in New Jersey referencing Colorado, which I did not know this, but apparently Colorado went from being number 40th in the nation in job growth to now number 4.
Oh yeah, it's huge. There's job fairs where people come with resumes. I mean, looking for jobs in dispensaries. It's what waitering used to be when I was in college or finishing school. Okay, like that was your first job in between school or graduate school or between high school and college, right? You go to become a waiter. Now you get a job as a bud tender in a dispensary, or you become a grower or a trimmer or some other ancillary thing. It's a big industry. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. There's a lot of other stuff out there. Obviously, we'll continue to share on our social media. If you like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, anytime we see news that we like, we try and share it and pass it along all to you. But with that, I think we should probably just get into the episode.
Our guest this week is Mike Ray, who founded Bloom Farms. Mike is an interesting guy. He worked on Wall Street for a number of years, found it sort of dispiriting, not what he wanted, gave up, and then returned to California where he grew up. He grew up in a farming community, and he saw that, strangely enough, even in the midst of abundance, there were still people in his community and surrounding it who were going hungry, who didn't have enough to eat. And he wanted to do something about it. He also wanted a change of career. He went back into growing. Of course, the crop he decided to grow was cannabis, and he decided to do it sustainably, and he also decided to give back to the community. He found it insupportable, really, that a product that was generating so much income wasn't feeding people, wasn't helping people to survive, really. So everything about Bloom Farms has this idea of giving back. They support meal programs. They do amazing community events. I mean, they do great fun stuff. Also, they'll do dinners, cannabis dinners, which will have different pairings of cannabis with different foods, have used cannabis to set different moods throughout the meal. It's all very interesting. Mike is very involved in helping to turn cannabis, which is suffering under so much stigma, into something that can enhance a healthy, giving back, sustainable life. And I think that's a great reason to talk to him. And one of the main reasons I wanted to meet the man and have a talk about his oils as well as the way he runs his business. Okay, Michael Ray. You Mike or Michael?
My mom calls me Michael. My friends call me Mike.
Good. Let's talk about how you started this company. Why did you begin to start an oil company and when? A long time ago.
A long time ago. Well, not that long ago, but a long time ago in the scope of the cannabis world. They say things in the cannabis space kind of operate at dog years. Everything's moving so fast. One year is like 7, and I guess it really all started kind of, at upbringing. Really, grew up in the Sierra Foothill Mountains in a town called Calaveras County called Calaveras County, and it was a high cultivation area back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and still today. And the industry really propped up the community up there in many ways. A lot of my childhood friends, their families kind of relied on it.
Families growing in addition to supplement their incomes, right?
Pretty much make their incomes, really. I mean, there's not a lot of industry up there. The industry up there is dominated by jobs at the local hospital, the local high school, and the government center. So
this is true for a lot of Northern California, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of small towns. Yeah. There's just not a lot going on there, especially in an area that's covered in hundreds of square miles of trees, which served cover. It was cover in that area.
It's not great growing territory. We know that it was good for cover. That's what it did.
It was good for cover.
Yeah.
And
so you grew up in this. Were you aware of all the cannabis around you growing up?
Yeah, I mean, people didn't really talk about it, but kids talk, and you knew it, but you knew you weren't supposed to talk about it because at the time, in the 80s and into the 90s, there were stiff penalties. People going to prison and confiscating property and civil asset forfeiture, all that stuff. Even as a kid, I remember thinking like, that is absolutely crazy that they could throw my friends' parents in prison for years and years for growing this plant.
Mm-hmm. Were you a big user when you were a kid?
No, I wouldn't say a big user. Definitely, consumed in high school some, but it was never really a huge part of my life. I was into sports and stuff like that. But certainly,
it was there.
Certainly, it was there. Moved away to school in Santa Barbara for about a year. Was fine. Got through classes. A lot of distractions. Santa Barbara was a lot of fun. Decided pretty quickly that I wanted to kind of get into the real world. I want to start working, and ended up moving out to New York. And
to do?
I got a job as a trader at a day trading firm called Broadway Trading. And at that time, this was at the beginning of the internet bubble. Rise.
So you made a fortune
before the burst. No, I didn't make a fortune, but I made a fortune for a 20-year-old.
Gotcha.
How
long did you survive?
Several years. I ended up moving back to California in 2008 after the banking collapse. And just didn't really want to be involved in the finance world anymore.
Why?
There was just a certain level of unaccountability and criminal nature of the subprime environment, subprime mortgage environment, and banks going out of business, and it just wasn't fun anymore. So I moved back out to California with really nothing to do, nothing in mind, and reconnected with my old high school friends. Say, hey, I'm back in California. What are you guys up to?
What were they up to?
they were now second and third generation farmers,
Just farming.
cannabis farming.
Okay, that's what I mean.
Yeah, cannabis farming, and doing pretty well. They were supplying dispensaries throughout California, and it was very intriguing for me. It was, interesting in many ways. One being, a lifelong opponent on the massive failure they called the war on drugs. It was interesting in that aspect to potentially get involved. It was interesting in that I tend to see macro shifts from time to time. I saw it when it was happening in the finance world back in the late 90s. I feel like I saw it happen here in the cannabis space, just the social shift that was occurring at an extremely rapid rate.
This is around 2008, 2009.
It was around 2009, 2010.
And was it obvious here at that point? And how?
I mean, there were dispensaries everywhere.
Yeah.
They were all over the place. You could walk into a store with a medical recommendation and walk out with just, amazing products.
What was that experience like for you the first time?
It was a little surreal. I had been hearing about it and I knew it existed, but had never been able to. And I think the first store that I walked into actually was Harborside Health Center.
The biggest dispensary in the world.
Over here in Oakland. And beautiful, well designed, smart staff, amazing products, and it just kind of clicked like this is happening and I want to be part of it. I began to learn as much as I could about the space. Talked my friends into showing me how to grow. I had a small cultivation. Just wanted to learn. You wanted to learn how the supply chain worked. How does it go from seed to sale?
So you really wanted a businessman's perspective.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what all the talk was about and how to make it work and see if I could do that. And I was pretty confident that I could. So I started cultivating. Small scale. As a trader, I see things in risk reward. At that time, people were still being raided and arrested and put in jail for mandatory minimum prison sentences of 5 years on the federal side of things. So I just stayed really small and learned as much as I could, knowing that at some point it was going to continue to open up, the shift was going to continue to happen, and just patience, right? And I thought it was going to be a couple years. It turned out being 6.
Well, that's not a couple. Yeah, that's long. So how did it move into oil extraction? Because Bloom Farms is an oil extraction company, would you say?
Absolutely.
Good. How'd you get to that?
Well, the original plan was cultivation. The original plan was to wait for the right moment. That ended up being right around 2014. I started to, see less and less of people being raided and arrested, and more progress within the industry as far as legislation and regulation, and states like Colorado and Washington.
Yeah, gone legal.
So I decided in about 2014 that it was time to kind of scale up the operations, get bigger, create a footprint, do some branding, try to establish a place for myself in the industry for the long term. I really enjoyed working in the space. When I first moved back to California in 2010, I was probably one of the first in line that would roll their eyes when people said medical marijuana. I was like, oh, okay, medical marijuana, sure. It took about a month for me to completely 180 on that.
Tell me why. What happened?
Interaction with patients.
I had the same experience.
Interaction with patients, 100%.
That it actually really changes people's lives.
Changes people's lives for the better in many ways, replaces, massive regimens of, opiates, pain pills, medications in general. And then we'd see the stories of the kids and with the seizures, it was where the CBD was changing their life. And it took a matter of a month to completely change my entire way of thinking on cannabis as a medical product, as a medical aid for people. And that was pretty inspiring. And the people in the industry overall were great. A great group of people with a common goal of changing the way people see cannabis and getting people out of prison for it.
So how about oil? How'd you get into oil?
Okay, sorry.
We'll come back to community because it's important. It's really important.
I got sidetracked, but so it was cultivation. The plan was to scale up cultivation. I was going to, gather some investment from friends and family, and I was going to meet some of my friends out in Colorado to discuss the business plan I had written on how I was going to take my small grow and make it into a big grow. On the plane, I ended up watching an article or a news piece on CNBC called the Colorado Green Rush. Just happened to be browsing through it on my plane as I'm flying over there. And I was like, perfect, headed to Colorado. This looks like an interesting piece. And there was a feature on a bunch of companies. One was like Incredibles. And then there was one that was like some event people who were throwing events and cannabis dinners and art shows, and then there was a piece on a company called Open Vape that was doing cannabis oil, and it kind of got me intrigued because this was the first time I'd seen a vape pen and the technology that was available and how they were using that as a delivery system, and it was just interesting, like immediately interesting. I'm like, is this the new age? Is this where things are going? Is it oils? Is it vaporizers? And they walked the reporter through the facility, and they're showing off their expensive equipment and their beautiful office. And the reporter at the end asked them, how many of these things do you sell a month? And the CEO said something like, we sell 200,000 of these devices every single month. And she says, well, is it profitable? And he was just smiling from ear to ear. He's like, very profitable is what he said. And for me, I watched that and it flipped a switch for me. It was like, this is what we need to do. This is the new age of cannabis. This is where the technology is going to take this plant. And I got off the plane and I tore out my business plan, went to the first dispensary I could find. I bought 4 or 5 of these pens, met up with my friends, and everyone was just blown away. They're like, this is so cool.
Well, they knew about the pens, right? Or did they not know?
No, this
was really early days.
Yeah, this was 2014. These things had really just started going around, and they were just really an enjoyable experience. So we had them on the chairlift when we were headed up on the slopes. We had them with us all weekend, and I told them, like, this is what we're going to do. Forget the cultivation. That is a project that I think that we should pass on for now and focus on the oils. 2 months later, flash forward, I had an extractor machine shipped out from Ohio from a company called Apex, and it was off to the races. I scrambled around trying to find a place to put it because at that time landlords weren't really open to it. I found a friendly landlord over in a very scary part of East Oakland that was not probably one of the safest neighborhoods in Oakland, and we set up shop. And I started learning as much as I could now on how to extract, how to turn it from a raw oil to a winterized, purified product that would work inside the vape pens, and it was a learning experience.
Let's talk about 2 things. Let's talk about what makes a great oil, even like what winterization means, and how a buyer, a consumer, can really tell, because it's really hard when these things are packaged inside of glass capsules to know what the product is. You can't smell it. You have no sensory experience of it. So let's go to the first part, which is what makes a good oil?
Well, I have friends that work in the wine business, and there's a saying in the wine business that you can make good wine with good grapes. You can make bad wine with good grapes, but you can't make good wine with bad grapes.
You can't make great wine with bad grapes. Is that the
You
expression?
can't make good, can't make great. The point being is really what you put in is what you get out. You need to start with an amazing material. For us, it was forging relationships with some of my lifelong friends up in the hills to provide me with their ultra amazing, high quality trim material. Literally the oil is made out of the trim material. This was another fascinating piece of the puzzle for me because as a child, I remember studying the Native Americans here in California. My dad would tell me stories, and he would always say the Native Americans were so amazing because when they would take down a deer, they would use every single part of it. They would never waste a single part. The bones would be tools. The
hoofs.
The tendons would be arrow strings.
The stomach was something to carry wine or liquid
They
in, right?
respected the deer so much that they would use every single part, whereas the white man in that era would run through the plains, shoot buffalo, skin them, and leave them out there to rot, just taking the most valuable part. And that story always kind of stuck with me as a kid. And that was one of the interesting things about this particular means of production is that we were using the leftovers. We were using what people had been throwing away forever to turn it into this really beautiful, amazing product, the oils. And that's really where it all starts from, is the starting material.
So how do you know, though, let's move to the consumer, how do you know where it's coming from? How do you know the provenance of anything?
Well, I think, for me in the early days, I knew the people personally.
You did?
Yeah, I knew the farmers.
How did you transmit that to me, the buyer?
Well, to you, the buyer, I think the same way, your favorite products transmit their value to you by consistent, reliable experiences. You buy something for the first time and either you like it and buy it again, or you don't and you never buy it again.
So did you start using propylene glycol in your oils, and did you start that way? How did you, tell me the evolution of where you're at today, because today you don't use propylene glycol as a thinner, correct?
No, we don't.
What do you use instead?
So today, what we use is naturally derived terpenes from the cannabis plant to thin the oil to a viscosity that works well in the hardware.
Tell people, for those who don't know, what a terpene is.
So terpenes are really everything that makes up the smell and the taste of cannabis, and they're not limited to cannabis. When you slice open an orange and you smell that orange smell, what you're getting is an array of very fragrant and potent terpenes.
Neroli, limonene, you're getting all these similar ones that are in cannabis.
Hundreds of them, yeah, there's hundreds of them. And this is what a lot of people who know things about cannabis plants attribute to the varying effects. Sativa versus indica. This one strain makes me sleepy. This one strain makes me awake. This one strain makes my back pain go away. This one provides a different experience. It's what many people refer to as the entourage effect of not just the THC, cannabinoids and the terpenes. And this is all just really fascinating stuff that has kept me interested and engaged in the making of this stuff.
So one thing that people say is that the terpenes that are derived from the whole plant are better, more useful, more fragrant, more something, more directional in the high, if you will, than the isolates you can just buy and drop into the oils. Do you have any experience of that? Any evidence to say that that's true or not true?
I think evidence is limited all around, and it's been limited by the inability to really study the plant via federal prohibition. I think that over the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to learn so much more about the plants, the entourage effect, the way that terpenes interact with the human body. I'm very excited about the future and very excited to see what comes out of, true ability to study it.
Yeah. They're already doing a lot of that in Israel. But so what kind of terpenes do you use? Do you use terpenes that are extracted from the plant, or do you buy the isolates and toss them in and make your own little magic formula?
We use the same We have a proprietary process that we use where first we extract the terpenes and we separate them. And this is under a very specific extraction parameter, to make it sound simple. It's low pressure, low temperature extraction, and we're able to collect terpene content.
Smell molecules.
It's amazing. If you're ever able to come up to our facility, I would love to let you have a whiff of our terpene library. And this is all coming from the plants that we either grow or purchase from our partner farmers. We then will extract the oil at much more economic parameters, so that we can get all of the good stuff out of the plant. It is then processed. We do a filtration where we pull the plant waxes and the lipids out of it, all things that are not good to vaporize and inhale. We pull all of those out, leaving a very clean, clear, and pure product. Much like a lavender oil, or just no plant byproducts.
No particulate.
Yeah,
right?
no particulate. Very beautiful amber oil. At that point, because the processing process involves heat and pressure, it actually causes the terpenes to dissipate. But fortunately for us, we now have the separate batch that we had pre-extracted, and we're able to mix those back in.
Okay, so do you use a butane or a hexane extraction method, or do you use something a little less?
We use exclusively CO2. We don't do any petroleum-based solvents such as hexane, propane, butane.
Any reason?
For me, I think that there's a public perception issue. The truth of the matter is, if you have the scientific background, you have the equipment, you have the facility, those solvents can be used in a very safe and effective way. The problem is that most people don't. Most people, at least up until recently, were buying cans of butane from head shops and shooting them through homemade pipes, and in many cases, blowing up their apartments, causing fires, causing general havoc. Dozens and dozens of stories of people injured, killed, buildings destroyed, explosions due to highly illegal underground hash oil labs. The CO2 really made sense for us. The machinery is very sophisticated, it's very expensive, but it has multiple safety checks. It's quite safe. There's not been an instance that I know of where a CO2 machine has exploded. We're talking about an inert gas that is non-explosive, non-flammable, and this is what we breathe out every single time we take we take a breath. Just to finish that thought, we made the conscious decision to use CO2 because I feel it is, one of the safest, most effective ways to create the essential oils.
You guys spend a lot of time and money, I presume, on events and things that are not directly related to selling your oils. You do these bud tender bashes where it's almost like a jobs fair. You do a meals program for those in need. You even do canister-style dinners, right? So why do you do those things? What's the point of a meals? Explain your meals program to me. I know it's a lot of meals you're serving. Explain why.
Let me start with, and I think that this will explain it. Our overarching mission as a company is to change the conversation around cannabis by promoting the healthy, active lifestyles of the responsible cannabis consumer. I think that there's a lot of stigmas, or historically there have been. Those stigmas are being released in some part by our work. We want to show people that the stereotype that people who smoke or eat or vape cannabis are not necessarily what the decades of media and misinformation has portrayed. Right? It's not about vegging out on your couch, eating junk food all day, and playing video games. It's about living life to its fullest. It's about healthy, active lifestyles, responsible people with families. The truth of the matter is that is your consumer, and a lot of people are just very hesitant to talk about it. So, a lot of these events, Bloom Appetit, which is our high-end kind of dinner party, Bloom Fit, which is our cannabis and yoga integration, are all tools to break down the stigma and show people, how great cannabis can be when paired with, everyday life things. That's kind of the point behind
the overarching point. Yeah. Good. So tell me about the meals. Tell me about meals.
So I made a conscious decision when I started the company. I've always wanted to be in a position where I could kind of give back to the community. And food insecurity is a passion project of mine, fighting food insecurity. Where I grew up in Calaveras County, there is a lot of food insecurity, and that's defined by not having enough to support 3 healthy meals a day. 1 in 7 households in California is now could be considered food insecure. 1 in 5 children. 1 in 5 children are going to bed hungry every night and don't know where their next meal's coming from. I saw this a lot growing up in Calaveras County. Very poor community, not a lot of industry, not a ton of jobs. It just doesn't have everything. And when you talk about California being one of the largest economies in the world, it just doesn't seem like we should put up with that, and we need to do something to fight against it.
So what are you doing?
So we launched what we call Bloom Gives, which is a 1-for-1 program. For every product sold, we donate a healthy meal to a local food bank here in California. We work with 4 food banks: San Francisco Marin Food Bank, Alameda County, Sacramento, and Los Angeles World Harvest. We just celebrated a big milestone for us, which is 500,000 meals donated to food banks throughout California. Our goal is 1 million meals in 365 days, and we are we're close. We are chugging along, very excited about it, making a big difference for a lot of people, and it's
What's the response been? So when you come up and say, "Hey, I'm a cannabis company and I want to donate to your issue, your food problem here."
Today,
do people ever say, "We don't want you because you're a cannabis company"? Has that ever been your experience?
Today, it's easy. 2 years ago, not so much. We got denied by several organizations that we approached to work with on this program. Just not interested in working with cannabis companies.
Even in California?
Even here in California. We're not philosophically against what you guys do, but we can't work with you.
Okay.
Which was kind of hard to swallow. For me, it's not political. It's about feeding people. And fortunately for us, we didn't take no for an answer. We kept pushing, and we ended up partnering with the San Francisco Marin Food Bank, who was our first partner. When I met with them, we sat down, we talked, and they were 100% on board. They completely were behind our philosophy of it's not political, it's feeding people. And they've been a great partner ever since.
Does anybody, my cynical self says, there's something really marketing about this, really cynical in marketing, but I'm not sure. Not quite sure I know why. What do you think?
Marketing. I think that any marketing that it does create is only a good thing.
Yeah, I can't really see that. Even as I say, I feel it's cynical, but I can't even understand why.
We're literally bringing more eyes to the problem.
And a solution to the problem.
And attempting to bring a solution. We are still a drop in the bucket. We are not going to solve food insecurity in California by ourselves. I would love to enroll more organizations in helping this fight.
What about that? Are you ready to take a leadership position? Is your company ready for that?
It's on the itinerary.
This year?
Absolutely.
Is there an organization that you're starting, a foundation you're starting, some sort of org that will manage all this?
We don't have an organization structured currently. We recently hired a corporate social responsibility manager. Their role is to do exactly that. They are the liaison for all of our interactions and communications with the food banks. They've been tasked with setting up more partnerships, setting up strategic partnerships that will work in conjunction with us and work in conjunction with our partnerships and try to get this snowball to roll down the hill and get bigger.
One last time I'm going to say I'm a consumer. I'm in a dispensary. I see a million different oils and million different pens. How do I know what is a good pen? I mean, I've taken pens apart myself, and I've seen how the insides crud up or actually even disintegrate at times. Some of the cheaper pens made in China, actually they burn the metals. Is that still the case? How do you guard against it? Are you concerned about it? How do you make it better?
Well, I think like with all technology, time, energy, and capital makes things better. 2 years ago, these devices, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, these devices were horrible. They were unreliable. They would have 10, 20% failure rates. I think one of the ways that we have found success is by implementing very strict quality control, quality assurance programs. I have spent time personally at the manufacturer's facilities. We have set up third-party quality assurance, quality control companies to come in and inspect when our products are being manufactured to make sure that they're being manufactured in the best way possible, the best build materials possible. And I think that if you were to ask around and do the research, you would find that Bloom Farms products have a much lower failure rate, have a much higher satisfaction rate, and we're continuing to evolve.
But is there something on the package that will be a clue to me as a buyer that says, oh, like for example, Bloom Farms pen better than X, Y, and Z pen? Because I find we have an explosion of products in the market right now, and very little reliable sourcing to tell us this is the better one. What can I look for?
I would look for ceramic heating elements. Our new product line, which has been slowly rolled out over the past few months and is going live next week.
The rose.
It's part of it, but it's the entire line are now utilizing ceramic heating elements. Ceramic is an extremely clean burning material. It's reliable and consistent and just overall better. And again, this is just a testament to time, technology, and investment, something that we're committed to.
What kind of a user are you? Are you heavy? Are you light? Are you moderate? Are you lightweight?
I have a very low tolerance. I consume probably a couple times a week, mainly for relaxation, stress relief, and it really helps me disconnect and get a good night's sleep. I've had a kind of a chronic insomnia person, and I think more and more we're seeing this in society today. Sometimes I'll do short lectures or talks for various events that I'm asked to participate in, and I generally start those talks with, how many people in here have trouble sleeping at night? And undoubtedly
50%, right?
70% of people raise their hands and answer that they, from time to time have trouble sleeping at night. And I don't know if it's the screens that are in front of us all day, or work stress, or family stress, or what, but it's certainly a problem for me. The 1 or 2 times a week that I'm consuming, that it satisfies that need that I have.
Have you ever had an issue about being considered a lightweight?
No, not at all.
Okay, just wondering.
Not at all. Cheap date.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mike. I'll call your mother and say thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Joe.
No, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
No,
really useful.
Thanks for coming in, and we're happy to have you here, and love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So as the final comment, I want to say one thing, Matthew. I was away in Massachusetts last weekend, and I checked into an Airbnb on a farm. It's a lamb farm in western Massachusetts in the Berkshires. And I said to the guy, hey, I need to record a podcast tomorrow morning. How's the Wi-Fi connection? He said, oh, great. What's the podcast on? I said, it's about cannabis, the new world of cannabis in the post-prohibitionist world. He said, oh, I'm growing 12 plants too. I said, oh, really? I said, this is an average, middle-aged, middle-class guy who raises sheep and lambs, basically. I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, I got some AK, I got some blueberry kush, I got this. I said, where'd you get it? He said, it's a friend of mine brought the seeds. I said, why are you growing it? He said, well, I love to grow, and occasionally I like the plant. And I said, it just strikes me that it's everywhere. And people love it. And it's another friend of mine who was visiting from the UK. Cannabis in the UK has not been the biggest thing. It's pretty much of a hashish culture. A friend of mine there, she's growing in her attic. It's just, maybe it's me, maybe because I write about this and I'm watching this, people are gravitating to me. I'm a magnet for it.
Right. Or, you're just in that world, right?
Maybe, but the fact that everybody's doing it and you don't know about it, it's completely quiet. They're plants. They grow. They don't make any noise. The sheep make more noise than the plants, right? It's just amazing, and it makes me crazy that the laws are so far behind the population at this point.
Yeah, this is what we touched on it when we were talking about Jersey before, and it's the same kind of thing in New York. Here when Cuomo talked about trying to get some laws and on the books to decriminalize, it's just everybody wants to argue about the legal logistics. How do you do it? How do you do it? But it's like the people are already doing it. So
it's not like we don't have legal models that work all the way. By the way, Washington and Colorado, they work. They're working.
Everything's fine. It's
not really a big problem. We have more problems with prescription opioids than we certainly do with legal cannabis by a mile.
Yeah.
So,
I saw 2 conflicting articles this week that we didn't cover in the news, and one was saying that teen use of cannabis in states that have legalized is actually down. That was what everybody was saying, right? Like, oh, you're going to legalize cannabis, and then like the kids are going to start using it. And studies are coming back and saying, well, that's actually not the case.
It's never been the case. In Holland, teen use goes down when they legalize cannabis. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with every other place. It's a little spike immediately after because everybody's curious, right? It's the new candy in the store. But the minute people get used to it, after a year or two, teen use drops precipitously. It's very interesting. And all use sort of levels off.
Right. Well, the other article, the reason why I didn't want to bring either of those up in the news is because I couldn't decide between which article made the most sense. Because one said, teen use is down in the legal states. And then the other article I was reading was talking about how use in general is up, but it's not because of legalization. They're finding that use is up, and when they talk to people who are new users, they're asking them why. They're saying things like, well, I did not want to be on opioids. I had a minor injury and I wanted to do cannabis for pain instead of opioids.
So it's a more medical. I believe that this medical thing is much bigger than anybody sees it, okay? I believe it. I think people are fed up with pharmaceuticals in lots of ways. And, they work to a certain extent and then they don't work. Like any medicine. And here, when you look at cannabis, and we're going to be talking about this a lot more going forward, the safety profile is unlike most medications because it won't ever kill you. You can never have long-lasting damage from it. And it's really got no long-lasting side effects. Everything disappears. It leaves the body. So it's a very interesting plant. It's a very interesting medicine, unlike almost all others.
I say keep the changes coming because that's what we need.
Me too.
Speaking of changes and new interesting things that are coming, Joe, big announcement. Your book is coming out in paperback.
Well, it's time. Yes, Brave New Weed is finally coming out in paperback at a reduced cost and a reduced size. Actually, they made it a very nice little package. So I'm very happy. It's out in October.
Cool.
I think it'll be on. It's already on Amazon. You can order it now if you want the cheaper, softer version, lighter weight version, and also we're going to be giving a bunch away to our Patreon sponsors. If you want to sponsor us, which audience, here's our shameless self-promotion at the end of the show. We value your sponsorship. We need it. It's what keeps us going. And if you come on as a Patreon sponsor, is there a certain level where I send you a book?
There is. I believe at the, at $10, you can get a signed copy of Brave New Weed.
So come on, give us a little support, listeners, and I'll be happy to send you some books. And we really, again, we've just started sponsorship, so we're really relying mostly on folks and our listeners to come on and help us keep this thing going and growing. We really like doing this. We want to do more of them. And so the more you can help us, the more we can do and bring you these conversations from the post-prohibitionist era.
Yeah, one of our goals, which we do have up on the Patreon, is that if we can reach 750 patrons, we've done the math, and we will say that at 750 patrons, we will move the show from once every 2 weeks to once a week.
I can't wait for that to happen. So come on, guys.
Cool. And speaking of next episode, Joe, the Vape Exhale, is that right?
Well, Sebo Shen is an amazing guy. He has created an extraordinary device called the Vape Exhale. It's probably the best inhalation device for using concentrates. It's the best one I've ever tried. I don't know of anything better. So he has a lot to say. The way he developed this instrument is really fascinating. They're coming out with all sorts of new iterations. And interestingly, he's an Asian American man who has an awful lot to say about what it's like being Asian American in the cannabis industry. There's a lot about that because this is a culture that is not pro-cannabis at all. So he is going out on a limb. He likes to go out on a limb. It's part of his MO. And I think you should definitely check him out next week when we next broadcast.
Yeah, I'm looking at this at the website. It's just Vape Exhale, all ran together, one E in the middle, vapeexhale.com. And this is quite an oddball looking rig here. This thing looks wacky. I've never looked into this before. I know you went out and did the interview, but I'm really curious to learn how this thing works.
Oh, it's amazing. It's a $700.
It's very modular, right? You like put it together like a kit.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's cooling. It's easy. It's very neat. You can do flour. You can do oil. You can do pretty much anything with it.
There's dabs here, right?
Oh, they're all dabbing all day long. I mean, they're just amazing. I mean, they consume enormous amounts of cannabinoids, much more than I can. But it's a very clean inhalation. He is not a smoker. He's never smoked a cigarette or a joint, I don't believe. It was really developed for people who don't enjoy smoking. He does not want to inhale hot things into his lungs at all. He's also one of these guys. He used to be a stuntman, and he's also he doesn't do Ultimate Fighting Champion. It's another kind of MMA, mixed martial arts thing. And he is really into using cannabis to train, to recover, as a sport, as a sort of athletic enhancement, which I can't imagine, but yeah, they do it.
Well, the Death Wish Coffee guys are super into MMA, so we'll get them to listen to the episode and the interview. I'm sure that they'll find it enjoyable as well.
All right, good. Anything else, Matthew?
No, that's it for me. I am going to get the rest of my stuff packed and then get on a plane. I hope you're feeling better, Joe.
Thanks for helping out on this. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
And I guess we're just going to have to be in touch and wing this as we go forward. Okay.
Yeah, we will. We got a couple shows while I'm away, but I'll be back come November. We'll be right back on the grind to produce the.
Too. I've got a list of people I want to talk to. So, okay, folks. Matthew, have a great trip. I'll be with us for the next couple of weeks here, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks to talk about the Vape Exhale with Sabo Shen.
Appreciate it, Joe, and I hope you get to feeling much better. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.
Hello, faithful podcast listener. I'm the Incredible Jeff.
And I'm the amazing D-Man.
And together, we host Fueled by Deathcast, a weekly podcast show from Death Wish Coffee Company, the makers of the world's strongest coffee.
That's right, and you can find us every Thursday on deathwishcoffee.com, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, Google Music, and more.
And watch us live on the Death Wish Coffee Company Facebook page and check out all our videos on YouTube.
We bring you the latest interesting news in the science world, an exclusive look at the world's strongest coffee company, and a special guest every week.
The guests could be rock stars, actors, authors, athletes, or even astronauts, and we ask them all the question, what fuels you?
So tune in every week to find out the answer, get inspired, and fuel your passion with Fueled by Deathcast.